"We got your dream house," my sister and parents announced as they walked into my engagement dinner. They had bought the Cliffside cottage I planned to propose in. "Crazy how life works, huh?" my sister smirked. I raised my glass. "To surprises," I said. The next hours, they had no idea what my fiancé had told me last night. The truth was. "So you're really telling me you didn't know who she was?" I asked. Julian didn't look up. "I didn't. I swear. Not at first. I didn't connect the dots until I saw her at your parents' house that Thanksgiving." "And she knew?" A pause. A slow, bitter nod. "Yes." That was the moment something in me stopped moving. "I'm 34. My name is Nadia. I live in California, Carmel by the Sea, to be specific. It's the kind of place where every storefront feels like it belongs in a fairy tale and every house has a history, including the one this story is about. I've worked hard my whole life. Architecture isn't a glamorous field unless you're rich, connected, or pretending to be both. I'm none of those things. I started with unpaid internships and 10-year-old software on a cracked laptop. I've eaten ramen more times in my late 20s than in college. But eventually, I made it. I got licensed. Got a solid job. And I got Julian. He's a structural engineer, and we met during a coastal project in Big Sur. He's kind. Stable. Thoughtful in a way that made me feel like I could breathe around someone, maybe for the first time in my life. It wasn't fireworks, it was something better. Quiet safety. We'd been together 3 years and had talked about marriage loosely, but I wanted to make it concrete. I wanted to be the one to propose. I planned to do it at a small cliffside cottage just south of Big Sur. It was our spot. We'd driven past it the first month we were dating, and on a whim, I'd pulled over and we snuck through the overgrown path to peek at it. The whole place looked like it had been plucked from some forgotten coastal novel: aged stone, sea glass windows, wild ivy up the sides. Julian had looked out at the view, then at me, and said, "This feels like a forever kind of place." I never forgot that. The cottage went up for sale a year later. The asking price was obscene, but I'd been quietly saving. I negotiated. I pulled strings. I was about to make an offer. I didn't tell anyone. It was going to be my secret gesture, my way of showing Julian the future I saw for us. A home, a life, a foundation. Then, the night before our engagement dinner, everything shifted. Julian sat on the edge of our hotel bed with his hands clasped, the same way he did when he had to deliver bad news at work. Only this wasn't about a bridge inspection. It was about my sister. "I slept with her," he said. "It was a one-time thing. It was before we were official. I didn't know who she was. I remember the way the room didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore." Apparently, it happened a year into us seeing each other. Technically, we hadn't had the talk, though we were exclusive in every other way. It was the night of my father's retirement party. Julian had gone down to the hotel bar after I went up to bed early. And Celeste, my sister, had done what Celeste does. She knew. And she didn't care. She never said a word to me. Not after she realized who Julian was. Not after they met again. Not even when I'd told her about the proposal. Not even when I showed her a photo of the ring. Celeste has always had a way of taking what I care about and spinning it into something that suits her more. She's 2 years younger, but she's always acted like she was older, smarter, shinier. My parents fed into it. Every achievement of mine was nice, while hers were a reason to celebrate. When I got a promotion? "We're proud of you, sweetie." When she got a new boyfriend? Full family brunch with champagne. It's been that way since we were kids. But this wasn't just pettiness. This was surgical. The next day, I put on my best dress, smiled at guests, and waited for my cue to make a toast. I was trying to keep it together when they walked in, my parents, followed by Celeste, all glowing with some shared secret. Guess what we did, my mom said, breathless with excitement. We bought something very special. Then Celeste stepped forward with a manila envelope and a wide grin. We got your dream house, she said. My father chimed in, the Cliffside cottage you're always going on about. I stood there, stunned, while she pulled out the deed. Closed this morning. Isn't it amazing? We thought it'd be the perfect family getaway spot. It wasn't just a coincidence. They knew. I hadn't told Celeste I planned to buy the house. But I had gushed about it. I had told her it was the place I wanted to propose. I even let slip that I was working on a surprise. That's what I get for forgetting who I was talking to. And here she was, waltzing in at my engagement dinner, hijacking not just my future plans but my entire moment. Smirking. Daring me to react. I raised my glass. To surprises, I said. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream or throw my drink or expose the truth. I let them toast and clap. I hugged Julian for the cameras. I even thanked my parents for being so thoughtful. And the whole time I was planning my next move. I didn't care about revenge, not really. I cared about reclaiming what was mine. The truth. My boundaries. And maybe a little dignity. A week later, I moved out of the apartment I shared with Julian and got a short-term rental near Pacific Grove. I told him I needed time, and I meant it. I wasn't trying to punish him. I just couldn't live in the same space while carrying that kind of betrayal in my chest. We talked, sometimes. He tried to explain again. He apologized, more than once. But something in me had shifted. It wasn't just about the one night anymore, it was about who he chose to tell and when. And who he let keep secrets. Meanwhile, I went to work. I knew the house was technically theirs now. But I also knew a thing or two about coastal permitting. Celeste had grand plans, some of which she had posted online, boasting about turning the place into a rentable wellness retreat by the sea. She didn't understand the zoning restrictions, or how hard it would be to get renovation permits, especially in that area. But I did. I filed complaints. Quietly, anonymously. I contacted the Preservation Society and shared photos, history, original builder details, anything that might trigger a heritage protection review. And it worked. A historical review board got involved. The house was frozen under review. Celeste tried to speed things up. My parents tried to pull strings. Nothing worked. The mortgage, secured in their name, started bleeding money. And Celeste, predictably, panicked. That's when I made my move. She called me, of course. Eventually. When her efforts started to crumble and her dream of owning the house became more of a financial noose than a flex. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I still remember because I was standing in line at the hardware store, holding a can of paint for a rental unit I'd just taken over, ironic, considering the actual house I wanted was sitting untouched on the cliff, roped in red tape she never saw coming. My phone buzzed. Celeste. I stared at her name on the screen, thumb hovering over decline. But curiosity got the better of me. Hey, sis, she said. Her voice had that fake cheerfulness she used when she was trying to sound innocent. I didn't respond. Just let the silence hang. So, she laughed nervously. Funny situation with the house. Still nothing from me. We didn't realize all the paperwork would be such a nightmare. Permits, historical stuff, ugh. Honestly, I don't even know how this stuff works. You didn't check before buying? I asked, calm. Well, we were in a bit of a rush, she said, dodging. Anyway, listen, I was wondering if maybe you knew someone? You've got all those contacts, right? In architecture? Maybe you could, I don't know, help move some things along? There it was. The reach. The ask. The unspoken admission that she was in over her head. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I told her I was busy and hung up. Later, I sat in my car outside the house I was renting, staring at the phone, heart racing. That conversation had given me more than satisfaction, it had given me a window. She was desperate. And I knew what came next. Within 2 weeks, the for sale by owner sign went up. She didn't list it publicly at first. She was trying to keep it quiet. Pride. But I was watching. I had alerts set up, agents ready, paperwork prepped. The second it went on the market, even as a whisper, I pounced. It wasn't cheap. It cost me more than it should have. And I had to call in favors I didn't even like cashing. But I did it. I bought the house from them. Not under my name, at first. I had it routed through a trust to avoid drama. The closing date was poetic. Exactly 6 months from the night they unveiled it at my engagement dinner. I didn't tell them. Not right away. I just drove up the coastal highway one quiet afternoon, parked my car, and walked into what was finally mine. It looked even more beautiful empty. The windows rattled in the wind. The floor creaked. The roof needed work. But the bones were strong. Stronger than they looked. And so was I. Julian didn't come with me. I hadn't told him either. Our conversations had grown sparse, tentative. He was trying. I could see it. But the wedge had been hammered too deep. What kept echoing in my head was the way he kept her secret. Not just for a moment, but for nearly 2 years. 2 years of dinners, family visits, shared laughter, and inside jokes that I didn't realize weren't inside for me at all. Some betrayals you can forgive. Others, you live through. You learn from. You don't necessarily heal in the way people expect. You just get stronger at standing up alone. I didn't move into the house right away. I spent weeks just walking through it, imagining what it could be. Not a rental. Not a wellness retreat. A home. One morning, I found a box in the upstairs closet, old photos, journals, letters from the original owners. One had a date, 1943. A black and white photo of a man standing on the deck, arms crossed, ocean wind whipping through his coat. I decided then I'd keep the house true to itself. I wasn't going to gut it and rebuild. I was going to preserve what it had always been, a small, strong place meant to outlast storms. I submitted my own design plan to the city. Restorative, sustainable, respectful of the original footprint. I worked on it piece by piece, every weekend. Sometimes I'd walk along the cliffs, notebook in hand, sketching details. Neighbors would pass and nod. One old man stopped and said, "You the new owner?" I nodded. "Glad someone finally bought it who gives a damn," he said, tipping his hat. Those were the moments that carried me forward. I still hadn't told my parents. They assumed Celeste had sold it to a stranger. That they'd cut their losses. My mother complained about it during one of our rare phone calls, blaming everyone but herself. My father said it was a learning experience. Celeste, last I heard, had moved back into a studio in San Jose, dating some tech guy and pretending like none of it happened. Julian tried once more. He texted me after hearing from a mutual friend that I'd bought the house. "I hope it brings you peace," he wrote. I didn't answer. Peace wasn't what I was chasing anymore. I wanted honesty. I wanted clarity. And most of all, I wanted to be able to walk into a space and know, without a shadow of doubt, that it was mine. Not a gift. Not a hand-me-down. Not a leftover from someone else's mess. Mine. The next time I saw Celeste was by accident. Or maybe it wasn't. It was a Sunday morning at a small outdoor cafe in downtown Carmel. I was sitting under a vine-covered trellis, coffee in hand, sketching facade ideas for the cottage on a napkin when I heard the unmistakable click of her heels behind me. "Nadia?" I didn't turn around right away. Just closed my notebook slowly and took a sip of coffee. She sat down without asking. Celeste had always had a way of walking into a space like she owned it. But that morning, there was something different in her posture. Less smugness. More damage. So. You bought it. No preamble. No pretending. Just that. I finally looked at her. Her makeup was lighter than usual, her hair in a messy bun. Not a Celeste look. A real person look. I did. She gave a tight smile, eyes narrowing. Through a trust. Cute. I didn't reply. Let her fill the silence. She always did. I figured it out about a month ago. Had a friend in real estate poke around. You really played it close. She stirred the sugar in her coffee like she was trying to convince herself this was just a casual chat between sisters. You knew what that house meant to me, I said, my voice flat. She sighed dramatically. I didn't think you'd actually buy it. I thought you were dreaming. You always have these ideas, but you never, I cut her off. Finish that sentence. She looked at me. For the first time in years, maybe ever, she hesitated. I was wrong, she said, finally. Okay? You made it happen. You got what you wanted. Congrats. She stood up like she was about to leave. Then paused. Julian was in love with you, you know. Even when it happened. It wasn't about feelings. It was a stupid mistake. One night. I thought, she trailed off. I raised an eyebrow. You thought what? That you wouldn't find out. There it was. The truth. Not remorse. Not even guilt. Just calculation that hadn't worked out in her favor. I didn't respond. I just watched her walk away. That conversation stuck with me, though. Not because I was surprised, nothing about Celeste surprised me anymore, but because of what it confirmed. There was never going to be a big apology. No tearful confession or effort to rebuild trust. She wasn't wired that way. It wasn't just Celeste I had to let go of. It was the idea of family I'd been holding on to, something that never really existed in the first place. I'd been chasing it for so long, like if I just earned it enough, they'd treat me like I mattered. The truth was, I'd always been the understudy in my own life when it came to them. Even my mother, after the house fallout, never asked how I felt. Her main concern was how embarrassed she was that the community knew they'd sold it at a loss. She acted like I'd tricked them, like I'd orchestrated some elaborate betrayal just to make them look foolish. And maybe a part of me had wanted that. Not out of cruelty, but survival. When you're raised to believe you're lucky for scraps, you eventually start craving more than just fairness. You want correction. You want the world to notice the parts of you that had been ignored, rewritten, or stolen. I didn't go to family dinners after that. I stopped replying to the holiday texts, the birthday calls. It wasn't some dramatic cutoff, it was just a quiet, final pivot. A step out of a cycle I no longer wanted to dance in. Instead, I poured myself into the house. Every day off was a project. I stripped layers of paint off the original trim, found old tiles under the bathroom floorboards, researched the builder's background. Turned out the home had been designed in the 1930s by a Japanese-American craftsman named Haruto Mori, who'd built only 4 homes in the area before being relocated to an internment camp during the war. No one had preserved his story. But I would. I framed a photo of him I'd found in an old article and placed it in the hallway. It reminded me that beautiful things can be built by people who've been through hell, and that honoring someone's work sometimes starts by simply choosing not to erase it. Neighbors started stopping by. Some curious, others just friendly. I met an elderly woman named Frances whose husband had known Maury. She brought me a faded blueprint of the house she'd kept for decades. Said she always felt like the place had a soul. And it did. It was more than a house now. It was mine. Not just in the legal sense, but in the spiritual one. I had filled it with intention, with purpose, with pieces of myself that I hadn't realized were still waiting for a place to land. There were still moments of grief. When I'd wake up and reach for a phone to text Julian, then remember. When I'd see siblings laughing at brunch and wonder how people made it look so easy. When I'd run my fingers over the ridges in the cottage walls and think about how betrayal doesn't leave scars, it leaves blueprints. One evening, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, a single sheet, I should have told you the truth. You deserved that much. I'm sorry. J. No demands. No please. Just that. I sat with the letter for a long time. It didn't fix anything. But it acknowledged it. And sometimes, that's enough. Other times, it's just more paper in a box you'll never unpack. I tucked it into the drawer in my nightstand, next to the ring I never gave him. I hadn't returned it. Not out of spite, but because that moment, that intention, still meant something to me. Even if it never came to be. It was a symbol of a version of me that believed in something. That version deserved to be remembered too. And the house, every inch of it, was becoming a kind of tribute to that girl. The one who believed in fresh starts. Want me to keep going? There's more: what happened with Julian, how the house finally came together, and how I ended up turning my own heartbreak into something entirely unexpected. Just say the word. The letter from Julian stayed in my drawer for weeks, untouched but never far from my mind. Not because I wanted him back, by then, I didn't, but because it felt like the last piece of something unfinished. He had finally acknowledged what happened, in his way. That counted. Not as forgiveness, but as recognition. And that's all I needed. I never responded. Instead, I did what I always do when I'm building something important. I focused on the structure, the design, the little details that no one sees but that make all the difference. That house became not just my home, but my project, my proof, my monument to rising in the quietest, most powerful way possible. And the revenge? Well, that came steadily. By spring, the cottage had become a point of conversation in the community. People loved that I was preserving the original architecture. I was invited to speak at a local historical society event. A photo of the house, freshly restored but still true to its soul, made it into Coastal Living's Hidden Gems edition. A week after that article hit shelves, I got a phone call from a boutique architecture magazine in San Francisco. They wanted to do a feature on the house and its history, and me. Not for social clout, not for drama, but because I was doing the exact thing I had always been overlooked for: good, patient, beautiful work. The feature came out in early summer. My name on the cover. The article praised not just the restoration, but the way I had honored the original builder's legacy. I didn't need to mention my family, or Julian, or the betrayal. The story didn't require them to be whole. Their absence said enough. But fate, or karma, has a funny sense of timing. Just 2 weeks later, I was invited to an industry gala in Monterey. I almost didn't go, but an old professor talked me into it, saying it could help with new clients. So I showed up. Dressed sharp. Chin high. I wasn't expecting anything beyond a few polite conversations. But halfway through the night, I saw Celeste. She was standing near the back of the room, next to a man I recognized as a mid-level investor in luxury real estate. Her smile was plastic, her posture stiff. I didn't go to her. I didn't even wave. But she saw me. And I saw the flicker. She had read the article. She knew. The house, the one she'd tried to claim as hers in front of our entire family, was now mine, and not just in paperwork. In legacy. In recognition. Her brief stint of glory was replaced with the long, steady warmth of earned respect. She had the spotlight for a moment. I'd built a lighthouse. Later that evening, someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was the investor standing beside her earlier. "You're the one who restored the Morey house?" he asked. I nodded. He smiled. "Impressive. Your sister was trying to sell me on her short-term rental business a while back. But honestly, I like people who think long-term." I smiled, polite but firm. "So do I." We shook hands. He handed me his card. If you ever think about designing for others, give me a call. I never saw Celeste again that night. But I didn't have to. The message was delivered without a word. You stole a moment. I built a legacy. I spent the following year turning the cottage into a living space and creative retreat. No Instagram photo shoots. No overpriced yoga retreats. Just a warm, coastal sanctuary with rooms full of light, polished wood floors, and books stacked in every corner. And when I was ready, I opened it, not to renters, but to women rebuilding after betrayal, grief, or loss. Writers, artists, teachers, women who'd gone through divorces or breakups or just burnout. It became a quiet place to land, to work, to start again. I didn't publicize it much. I didn't need to. The people who needed it found their way. Julian never reached out again. I'm not sure if he saw the article or heard what I'd done. Maybe he did. Maybe he even drove past the house once, wondering what might have been. But that part of the story wasn't mine to wonder about anymore. I had let go of needing closure from other people. Because the real closure came when I walked out onto that deck on the first cool fall evening in the house, wrapped in a sweater, wine in hand, wind whipping off the sea, and realized I wasn't waiting for anyone to show up. No one was coming to rescue me, or apologize, or make it right. And it didn't matter. Because I had made it right on my own. So, if you're reading this and you've ever been betrayed by people who should have protected you, take this from me: you don't need to burn down bridges to move on. You just have to stop trying to carry the weight of people who were never walking with you in the first place. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's peace. It's purpose. It's a house on a cliff with no ghosts in the walls, because you finally stopped letting them live there rent-free.